Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, it is again a privilege to stand in this honorable place to represent the good people of East Grand Bahama, the people in High who are still waiting on their seawall, and also the people in Sweeting Ski, who also are still waiting on a number of infrastructure issues. And Mr. Deputy, just before I get into my presentation, I wish to raise a matter on behalf of the people in Sweeting Ski, who, through their local government, penned a letter to the Minister for Education, and they attached a petition for the reopening, the renovation of the Sweeting Ski All-Age School. And Mr. Deputy, if you would recall, this is something that I have raised on a number of occasions in this place, and they, I believe, have a particular issue because those residents who continue to reside in Sweeting Ski, they're not like everyone else who can just jump in the car and ride to their school. Because there is no school on the quay, they will have to go on a boat early in the morning and be transported. It's probably about a 25-minute ride from Sweeting Ski to McLeanstown. And then from McLeanstown, it's another hour drive to Freeport. And if you could imagine, Mr. Deputy, you've been to Sweeting Ski. Many of the colleagues have also been to Sweeting Ski. You could imagine having to do this on a daily basis really is an injustice, I believe, for that school to remain closed. And Mr. Deputy, the letter is signed by the Chief Counselor, Deputy Chief Counselor, and all of the council members. And they also attached a letter and a petition. And this petition was signed by the residents of Sweeting Ski. And Mr. Deputy, I want to officially say that I 100% endorse their request. They sent a copy of it to me as well. I want to, at the end of my presentation, I want to table this so that there is an official record that the people in Sweeting Ski have officially requested that their school be reopened. And I'll come back to that also after the presentation. It was damaged after Dorian. I'll answer it and come back to it. Mr. Deputy, Fred Smith KC wrote an article about the independence of the judiciary. He wrote that judicial independence is a cornerstone of democracy. Without it, those who hold political power can victimize and oppress with impunity. And I quote, he says, "But a fundamental role is to serve as a check on the official power and ensure that no one, especially the executive branch of government, is above the law." Justice Lyons stated that the judiciary, and I quote, "is not an agency of the government." He said, "It is an independent body established under the Constitution." Mr. Deputy, I support the passage of the Court Services Bill and all of the accompanying bills. This is a bill, I recall, our government did a significant amount of work on. And I want to commend the, as was said by the member for St. Anne's, I want to commend the former Chief Justice, Marie, who was a tireless advocate for the court service bill and the principle for which it represents. And also I want to commend the former Attorney General, Carl Bethel, who worked closely along with Brian Marie to draft our version of the bill. In 2020, the F&M drafted this bill, which is presented today with some minor changes. We support this bill and the principle it represents. But, Mr. Deputy, I want to discuss Clause 9 of the bill and what Clause 9 of the bill represents, which deals with the annual budget presented to the Minister of Finance. And I believe our version of the bill is identical to their version of the bill with respect to those financial clauses. Well, with some minor changes, I believe. This brings me also, Mr. Deputy, to discuss the IMF recent staff concluding statement of 2023, Article 4 mission. The IMF cautioned a fall in tourism demand. They said that it was a risk to our fiscal position, and especially stated that renewed pressures on global food and oil prices could impose a burden on lower-income households and put pressure on the balance of payments. Well, Mr. Deputy, this has been something that we have been speaking about for some time, almost to the point where some of the members on the other side almost make fun of the fact that we are saying remove VAT off of bread basket items. But I am shifting that to remove VAT off of bread basket items, but we need to remove VAT off of healthy food. And I believe that that is something that will add to assist when it comes to not just helping to provide food for people, but it will also assist to provide healthy food, which again has a health benefit. You know, Mr. Deputy, people all over the country, they are saying that if the economy is doing so well, why do they feel poorer? The dollar is not buying what it used to buy. We have to spend more money to buy the same amount of goods. We gave the government measures that would help persons in these situations. We said take VAT off of healthy food. Increase the amount provided for social services assistance. Increase the number of people who approve or who can be approved for these programs. You know, if the by-election exposed one thing, it is the level of need in Grand Bahama. We also need to give more to social services lunch vendors. Again, if they are being provided the same amount and they have to spend more money for these goods, then somebody is losing out. Either the vendors themselves are losing or the children are losing. And then this ought to be repaid by adding VAT back to 12% on property transfers over $1 million. We believe they could pay for it. Mr. Deputy, because the court budget will still come from the central government, they, as everyone else, should be concerned with what the IMF says. Based on our policy, and this is what the IMF said, and I quote, based on current policies, the fiscal deficit is expected to be 2.6% of GDP in this year, 2023-2024, considerably larger than that was expected in the budget. The IMF is projecting that the government's deficit for the fiscal year, this fiscal year, will approach $380 million, which is almost 300% higher than the $131 million deficit in the government's budget and the medium-term fiscal strategy. This massive projected spike in the deficit was also projected, Mr. Deputy, by the rating agency Standard & Poor's. They did it, and they projected it in September of 2023. Based on what we know of the IMF, they do their research, and I believe they would not publish something that they cannot justify. What prompted the IMF to make such a projection, and why is it so different from the government's projected deficit in their budget? The government must answer these questions. I saw where the Minister for Economic Affairs said, well, it's a difference of opinion. I believe the people of the Bahamas deserve a better answer than it is a difference of opinion. The government must state whether these projections, first by S&P and now by the IMF, are accurate. And if it is true that they are on track to blow the budget's deficit target by almost 300%. If this is so, the government must follow the fiscal responsibility provisions of the Public Finance Management Act and come to Parliament with a plan on how they will curtail their extravagant and unnecessary spending so as to bring the budget back in line with what Parliament had approved. The IMF, Mr. Deputy, also spoke of the implementation of the OECD Global Minimum Corporate Tax by trading partners providing an opportunity for the Bahamas to introduce a well-defined corporate income tax. We ask, what is happening with this proposal, or what is happening with this matter? We have not heard any move on this. The deadline was in August for consultation, and it is now December. What is the government's position on this? What is the plan? What is the timeline for the implementation? These are very relevant questions for the fiscal well-being of our country. The IMF also stated efficiency gains, and I quote, efficiency gains in spending programs and improvements.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Sutton heard East Grandmama read from a report, a concluding statement, the opening paragraph of which, the second paragraph reads, the authorities have consented to the publication of the statement. The views expressed in the statement are those of the IMF staff and do not necessarily represent the views of the IMF's executive boards. And so the statement begins by saying, this does not necessarily represent the view of the IMF executive board. Much of what you hear as a disclaimer before talk shows. It is saying, so he should say, this is not the view of the IMF. And if he goes up earlier, it reads, a concluding statement describes the preliminary findings of an IMF staff at the end of so-and-so. And it goes on to say, does not necessarily represent the view of the IMF executive board on the preliminary findings of this mission. The staff will prepare a report. So they still have to prepare a report, subject to management approval, will be presented to the IMF Executive Board for discussion and decision. So he is reading from something upon which no decision has been made. But if he frames it in that manner, because I'll direct the Bahamian people where they can find it online.
Yes,
but to say it is the view of the IMF.
The IMF
The
staff.
IMF itself
I'll
says
put staff.
it's not the
I'll
view.
put staff. No problem.
It's not the view.
I will put staff.
The preliminary
I will
view.
put staff. If you want me to put staff, I'll put IMF
Mr.
staff.
Deputy Speaker, I can help through you. I can help him. If he says that what he is saying is a preliminary finding of the IMF staff to be presented to the board for consideration of their adoption, that would not do any violence to the truthfulness of what he is saying.
Thank you, Member.
And Mr. Deputy, I have absolutely no difficulty adopting the exact words that the member for Freetown has said. Now I'll move on. The IMF staff has said efficiency gains in spending programs and improvements in the financial management of state-owned enterprises will be needed to offset some of the budgetary pressures rising from an aging population. The IMF staff is saying, get the state-owned agencies' spending in order. They could not be more clearer. BPL, Bahamas Air, Water and Sewage, the less we have to spend on supplementing these entities, the more we will have to spend on education, healthcare, and the court, which we are discussing today, and on seawalls like the one that is needed in High Rock, the one that I spoke to on Monday, which requires urgent attention in High Rock. The IMF also told the government, or the IMF staff also told the government, additional steps should be taken to place more binding limits on the central bank financing of the fiscal deficit. They are speaking about more additional steps needs to be taken to limit the amount that central bank loans to the government to cover their deficit. It is my belief, my personal belief, that such a warning came as a result of the government's breaking the law and cleaning it up by amending the Central Bank Act. This was, in my view, wrong. And by the way, was the $200+ million ever repaid back to central bank? Did you ever plan to pay the central bank the money? The IMF said repaying the central bank back could serve to strengthen the government's credibility. If you do not pay it back, you will lose credibility. The IMF said also an independent process should be put in place to select members of the Fiscal Council. Mr. Deputy, we have said it was a mistake to change the appointment structure of the Fiscal Responsibility Council. If you recall, it was wrong to place this under the Minister of Finance. It was done under, when the Free National Movement created the Fiscal Responsibility Council, the appointment was done by the Speaker of the House of Assembly. That was changed by the PLP government, and they put it under the Minister of Finance. We said at the time that it would not be an independent body. This has now been confirmed by the IMF staff. This council is supposed to be the watchdog on the government on fiscal matters. Their criticism is not meant to embarrass the government, but to improve the government's situation and to improve the overall Bahamas' situation. The government's arrogance on this issue has done a great disservice to the people of the Bahamas by not having a functioning council. It is a disservice to the Bahamian people by this council not reporting since the PLP came to office. Mr. Deputy, there are other significant matters addressed. Could I get an estimation of time?
1 minute.
Okay.
5 seconds.
Mr. Deputy, there are other significant matters addressed by the IMF, like the Sand Dollar implementation and the court services is an ideal place for its usage. Payment of fees and other payments should be done or could be done by using the sand dollar. Also, the IMF mentioned more should be done with crypto regulation, monitoring to improve the situation. Mr. Deputy, on an issue which is highly relevant to me and to the people that I represent in East Bahama, that is, the IMF also mentioned the increase in the cost of property insurance. This was specifically mentioned by the IMF. Under the bill, the courts also have the ability to purchase property, which makes what the IMF said also relevant to them as well. The IMF, and I quote, says this: the increase in cost of the property insurance, they say, and I quote, this is leading to decreased insurance coverage, which in the event of an extreme weather event can potentially lead to significant losses for the population and ultimately create large fiscal needs. The IMF also presented potential solutions. They said a partial public funding of a micro-insurance product could be expanded in combination with a public mandate to carry a minimum level of property insurance. Mr. Deputy, we explored this, and I support the ability of a government program to assist home and property owners to obtain at least a minimum level of property insurance. This could take the form of a national insurance scheme for property owners. Mr. Deputy, after Hurricane Matthew, after Hurricane Dorian, the government had to fund millions of dollars to repair its own property, but also had to find millions of dollars to assist the population in repairing their own property. In fact, the government today still is attempting to repair a number of properties in Grand Bahama. And I would say they are still slow because the need is great and people are still waiting on home repairs as a result of Hurricane Dorian. We have a national insurance, which means that we have a health insurance, national health insurance, and national insurance also assists with a national pension scheme. Again, so that there are people who are in these positions who at the end of their senior life or at their senior life, they will have particular funds that they can use to help live on after they've retired. That's national insurance. National health insurance, again, is a scheme that will assist persons to be able to get health care. Property insurance is a major, major issue for people, particularly in the Family Islands, particularly in Abaco and Grand Bahama, which seems to be more frequently visited with hurricanes. So, Mr. Deputy, if we put in place these kinds of assistance programs, it will most definitely assist persons in East Grand Bahama. It will definitely assist persons in the rest of Grand Bahama that are in need. Also, Mr. Deputy, they said this: increased fiscal buffers will be needed to provide some relief to those that may be affected in future disaster. Well, I think this statement goes without saying that we still need funding to help those who went through Dorian. But we also need funding for those who are going to experience, unfortunately, who may experience a future storm. They also said, Mr. Deputy, and I'm sure that those of us in Grand Bahama, we've been advocating for this for years now. And I'm sure that the by-election also reveals something to some colleagues who West Grand Bahama, visiting West Grand Bahama may have been, you know, their first time or they've been their first time on the ground in West Grand Bahama. And that will reveal the extent of the need in West Grand Bahama. And the need also is in East Grand Bahama and also is in the rest of the constituencies in Grand Bahama, in Pine Ridge, Marco City, Central Grand Bahama. The need is great for home repair and home roof repair as well. Also, Mr. Deputy, finally, the authorities could consider designing financial instruments that incentivize private insurance. We must look at this situation. I believe that it is a national crisis. It is a national crisis that you have so many persons who are in these low-lying areas without proper home insurance. We have so many businesses that are in areas that are vulnerable, and they are there without proper insurance. And property insurance continues to go up. So this is a situation that requires immediate intervention and immediate assistance. And I want to thank the IMF for bringing this issue and making this issue a public issue and for speaking about this issue, because it just confirms what we have been saying. It confirms and agrees with the arguments and the advocacy that those of us on this side have been making. And that is, there continues to be great need as a result of these storms. And Mr. Deputy, as I conclude, I wanted to read, I want to go back to the Sweeting Ski. And I wanted to just read into the record what these parents in Sweeting Ski said and were requesting to the minister. It said, I hope that this letter finds you in good health and high spirits. I'm writing to you today on behalf of concerned parents and residents in Sweeting Ski community. We kindly request your attention to a matter that affects the educational prospects of our children and the overall development of our community. As you may be aware, Sweeting Ski All-Age School, the primary education institution on our island, has been closed since the passing of Hurricane Dorian in 2019. Since we understand the challenges posed by the declining student population, we firmly believe that reopening the school is vital to the future well-being of our community. It is important to note that under current conditions, students as young as 6 years old must catch a ferry at 6:30 a.m. every morning, combined with a 55-minute ride on a bus from McLeanstown to Freeport to attend school. By the time these students return home in the evenings, they are hungry, exhausted, and unable to focus on homework or extracurricular activities. Frequent adverse weather conditions pose certain risk. Mr. Deputy, I can tell you this. When there was a time when we had to travel to a church service and the weather was bad, I was frightened traveling on the ferry from McLeanstown to Sweeting Ski. But these persons, again, have to travel this every single day. Frequent adverse weather conditions pose certain risk, particularly to younger students, while simultaneously interrupting learning processes due to the many instances when they are unable to attend classes. Our children deserve better, and I wholeheartedly endorse that statement. Although the number of school-age students currently residing on the island is relatively small, we have been in contact with numerous families who have expressed a strong desire to return if they are assured of a quality education for their children. As families, we believe in the value of a tight-knitted community and wish to contribute to its growth. However, the absence of educational facilities proposes a significant deterrent to their return. Reopening of the Sweetings Key All-Age School will not only accommodate the educational needs of our current students, but also attract potential new residents. A thriving school system would help to revitalize our island, promoting economic stability and fostering a sense of pride within our community. Furthermore, reopening the school would reiterate the logistic challenges faced by parents who currently have to commute to neighboring islands or mainland areas to provide their children with an education. This additional burden negatively impacts the overall well-being and quality of life for both parents and students alike. We acknowledge that the decision to close the school was likely made due to unforeseen circumstances at the time, such as budget constraints and declining enrollment. However, we kindly request that you reconsider this decision and explore alternative solutions that would lead to the reopening of Sweetings Key All-Age School. We are willing to work collaboratively with the school district, local authorities, and others to find creative ways to make this endeavor financially viable. In closing, a gentle reminder is all involved in the decision-making process, and a community without children is a community that is dying. A community without children is a community that is dying. Our children are our future, and it is signed by the parents and the residents. And then there's attached a petition signed by all of the parents. And so, Mr. Deputy, as I said, as their member of parliament, they gave me a copy of it. I wholeheartedly endorse the sentiments in this petition. I agree with it 100%. I will advocate for it, and I will continue to advocate for it until the Sweetings Key School is open. There is work being done now, and I'll say, to the credit of the government, there is work being done now to McLeanstown School. Yes, there is work being done to the McLeanstown School, which we accept as needed, but there also is a continuing need for High Rock community, for Pelican Point community, who may not travel that distance to go to the McLeanstown School. And it still does not solve the issue with the Sweetings Key kids, who are still going to have to take a boat to get to McLeanstown. And so, Mr. Deputy, again, this is a vital issue. It's an issue that needs to be looked at, needs to be resolved, as well as the High Rock dock, the High Rock seawall that needs urgent attention. I did a Facebook feed on it to bring some attention to it, and we're going to continue to advocate for the High Rock dock. I want to thank residents in the area, particularly Bishop Ruben Roberts, who has a business and lives in the area, and also, I don't want to call her name, but she lives directly across the street. I've grown to love, but she lives directly across the street. She is an elderly lady, well known in the community. Her daughters are well known in the community. And when I went there on Monday, she says she has to call her children to come and pick her up because she's so frightened when there is bad weather. because there's a lack of the seawall, causes the water to come right across the street from where she lives. And she's frightened when there is bad weather. And so, Mr. Deputy, this is something that is an urgent need for the community. But as I said, Mr. Deputy, I support the court services bill, and I support the accompanying bills that are there. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, honorable member.